Chapter 18, you remember we've been discussing Alexander the Great as the apostle of Hellenism. He was determined to spread Greek culture. You remember his empire spread rather quickly. And then when he died, as we noted, he left no heir. And so there was a power struggle between the Ptolemies and the Seleucids. And you'll recall that some things happened during this time that were very pivotal, very significant. Alexandria, about 285 BC, is when the Jewish scriptures were translated into the Greek language. That's called the Septuagint. And that helped to prepare the Hellenistic world for the gospel. Now, one of the things we've talked about is some of the sites along the way that were celebrated examples of Greek culture. The Parthenon is one of those places. We talked about already Palestine under the Seleucids and the rise of Antiochus Epiphanes and some of the heinous things that he did. Now, let's talk about Antiochus a little bit. He did not take the band of Macabeans who were threatening to revolt or fight. He didn't really take them seriously, and so he really sent just a small detachment against them because he thought that he could win the victory with just small numbers. But Judas Maccabeus led his apparently ill-equipped army to victory after victory. And then when Lysias, the Syrian general, decided he was going to command the Syrian troops to stamp out the Jewish revolt, he was also defeated with heavy losses. Now please note this, 165 BC, Judas enters Jerusalem and he purifies the temple, reestablishes all the things that Antiochus had suspended, and the Jewish community, as we've noticed, still celebrates what's called Hanukkah, also known as the Feast of Lights. And they do that every December in commemoration of the cleansing of the temple by Judas. Now, your book has a family tree of the Macabees, and that would be helpful for you to just be familiar with. I'm not going to go over as much of this in detail for a couple of reasons. One, we're up against it time-wise, but most of you either have had or will have the summer school course on the period between the Testaments, and a lot of this is covered in such outstanding fashion by Dan Cates, who is our resident expert on that. One of the amphitheaters at the Decapolis city of Beshan is pictured here in your book, and we'll talk more about the Decapolis here in a little bit. Now, Lysias seizes the reins of government, prepares to attack the Jews, but as often was the case in ancient warfare, they'd get word that, hey, there's something trouble brewing at home, you better get home because someone's trying to take your throne. And so he went to defend his throne, and he actually offered full religious liberty to the Jews if they'd recognize his political right to rule. And that seemed to resolve the problems of the Jews, but didn't last because the throne of Syria kept changing hands. And you've got Alcimus, who is a hated high priest, who was very sympathetic to Hellenism. That didn't wash well with the Jews, and he had to flee. Now the Syrians backed Alcimus and prepared to attack the Jews. And then Judas died in battle in 160 BC. Of course, this is not Judas Iscariot. This is Judas Maccabeus. Now, Jonathan, the youngest brother of Judas, he got his brother's command, and things were favorable to him politically because of some treaties and alliances that were made. But ultimately, you'll notice Jonathan was murdered by Trypho, who was a pretender and a contender for the Syrian throne in 142 BC. And then a third son of Mattathias, Simon, took up the work of his murdered brother Jonathan, and in return for assisting the Jews in resisting Trypho, he renounced all claim to tribute. He gave the Jews full independence, and they made him the, quote, hereditary high priest and the ethnarch. And his rule was marked by tragedy because of Antiochus VII. He wanted to impose a tribute on Judea, but he met a very strong resistance from John and Judas, who were sons of Simon, and then a son-in-law by the name of Ptolemy murdered the aged Simon in a plot to gain power. Now, please note this: the dynasty of Simon was known as the Hasmonean dynasty, and it continued. Now, because Simon had a son named John, notice John Hyrcanus. He became the ruler of Judea in 134 BC, and his early years were very difficult because of Syria. They were besieging Jerusalem, demanding all kinds of heavy taxation and tribute, leveled the city's fortifications. But Hyrcanus was not about to admit defeat, so he built his army up, began a program designed to make Judea a powerful sovereign state. And whenever Syrian power started going down, Hyrcanus decided he'd fill the vacuum, conquer Samaria, note that, and he destroyed the temple the Samaritans had built on Mount Gerizim. And file that away. Who is it that destroyed the temple that was built on Mount Gerizim? That was John Hyrcanus. Now, Idumea was that portion of southern Palestine that was occupied by the descendants of the Edomites. And remember, the Nabateans pushed them up out of that area. And so the policies of John Hyrcanus were not popular among the pious people in Israel. He broke with the party of the Pharisees, and he actually joined the Sadducees. That was the party with the Hellenistic leanings, the Sadducees were. Now then there's Alexander Jannaeus, the brother of Hyrcanus, and under him things went from bad to worse. The borders were further extended, but the nation was in the midst of a civil war, and so as you see bitter opposition to the Sadducees, the Pharisees requested help of Demetrius III, a Syrian ruler, but Alexander Jannaeus emerged victorious, and he organized a celebration in which 800 of his captives were crucified. And that was not a pleasant thing, because not only were they crucified, imagine this, their wives and children were slaughtered before their eyes. How would you like to face the pain of crucifixion with the emotional anguish of seeing your wife and children murdered before your eyes and you being completely helpless to do anything to stop it? Well, things got a little bit better under Salome Alexandra, who was the wife of Jannaeus. Her son, Hyrcanus II, served as high priest. She was one who favored the Pharisees rather than the Sadducees. But the Pharisees and Sadducees were really seeking vengeance on each other. And then when Salome Alexandra dies, you've got even more of a battle for the throne, because they're fighting for power. The Sadducees want it, the Pharisees want it. Salome's second son, Aristobulus II, with the help of the Sadducees, gained the throne, but his brother Hyrcanus II was plotting his return to power, and that's when a man named Antipater, an Idumean by birth, keep that in mind, supported Hyrcanus, and he arranged things so effectively that his son Herod subsequently became the king of Judea. So during the war between Hyrcanus II and Aristobulus II, meanwhile, you've got the Roman general Pompey appearing on the scene. He conquers Syria, and then he sets his sights on Judea. Now, he'd heard about the rival claims of the two brothers who were fighting for power. He didn't trust Aristobulus, so he ordered the siege of Jerusalem, and watch this, 63 BC is when it fell to the Romans. In 63 BC, that's when Jerusalem fell to the Romans. And the Hasmonean dynasty, remember Simon's dynasty and its descendants, it continued nominally in control till about 37 BC, but really Roman power was found in Palestine until the end of the biblical record, and that needs to be kept in mind. There is, by the way, a very helpful and pretty comprehensive timeline in your textbook in this chapter on the Hellenistic age, but it covers more than just the Hellenistic timeline. It goes all the way back to early Israel and her neighbors, and it runs for several pages, actually discusses the divided kingdom and some of the major events and prophets and time period and who the contemporaries were, who the kings of Israel would have been. And so this goes on for, as I said, a number of pages, and it's pretty important for you to go back and take a look at some of those dates, especially the ones that we've mentioned on your study guide. Now we're ready for chapter 19, and that is a discussion of the Roman Empire. Rome was really one of those city-state type nations, and really unlike Persia that came, and Greece, which had one singular leader who was renowned for bringing them to prestige, such as Cyrus for Persia and Alexander the Great for Greece. Rome was really not founded in such a dramatic fashion by one singular figure. It was during the 8th century before Christ that a people known as the Etruscans took a certain hill. In fact, they took the city of 7 hills, and that's what, of course, by the way, your textbook has a pretty good map there about Rome in AD 14, what it would have looked like. But the city of Rome was known as, notice, the city of 7 hills. Tradition states that Rome was founded by Romulus or Remus, and Romulus and Remus actually in 753 BC. So in the years following 753 BC, there was some gaining of the control of the Italian peninsula, and your book goes into a lot of the history behind these wars. The Phoenician War was known as the Punic War. There were 2 major Punic Wars that are discussed in your textbook here. Sicily became subject to Rome. The Roman Empire kept expanding. By 220 BC, you've got a real battle going on between the Romans and the Carthaginians, and the Carthaginian general Hannibal attacked Saguntum on the east coast of Spain. Rome intervened, and that's what started the Second Punic War. And it looked like Hannibal for a while was going to get all the way to Rome itself. He was the one, by the way, in case you're not aware of it, who became known for using famed battle elephants. And that's not something I'd want running or chasing after me, and so they could be used with some degree of effectiveness. Hannibal crossed the Alps in 218 BC, marched down the valley, and the tide of the battle turned when a brilliant young Roman general by the name of Scipio took the initiative, and Hannibal was forced to retreat. The Carthaginians suffered a defeat that ended their threat to Rome in 202 BC. Now, Rome thus became the uncontested ruler of the Western Mediterranean. She turned eastward, gradually absorbed most of that territory that had been part of Alexander the Great's territory. And you see Roman Empire spreading to Macedonia, and that was a significant win for the Romans. And in 192 BC, the Greeks tried a kind of a last gasp, and the Romans repelled the invasion of Greece by Antiochus III, who was one of the Seleucid rulers. And then following a series of revolts against Roman power that did not pan out, 149 to 146 BC, that's when Macedonia gets organized as a Roman province. And one of the large provinces in Asia Minor was Pergamum. And the Attalus I, who was the king of Pergamum, bequeathed it to Rome. And the king of Bithynia willed his kingdom to the Romans in 75 BC. Now, there was, however, a rival who wanted the same territory. Mithridates was involved in this battle, but Pompey, the Roman general, defeated Mithridates, and Bithynia became a Roman province. And Roman power was first felt in Judea after they'd conquered Syria, when Pompey decides to get involved in that dispute I was talking about earlier. And so note this again, 63 BC, Pompey captures Jerusalem, broke down part of its defensive wall. Aristobulus is thrown into chains. Hyrcanus is restored to the office of the high priest. And then Antigonus, a son of Aristobulus, gets help from the Parthians, and they're actually able to reoccupy Jerusalem for about 3 or 4 years, 40 to 37 BC. And with the recapture of the Holy City, so-called, 37 BC, Roman power was established in Judea, notice, with Herod the Great. And he reigned as king of the Jews. We'll talk more about Herod and in the next session.